Previously on Kennedy.
We will gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God.
Kennedy comes home a different man.
Joe Jr.'s death is a knife into the heart of the Kennedy family.
World War II was maturing for a whole generation, of course, but for John in particular, he came back with a sense of responsibility.
Well, he knew that politics was the world.
He knew, I think, in his heart that he was destined for greater things.
To lead us to a fruitful America from the state of Massachusetts, John F. Kennedy.
John F. Kennedy lived a life that would help define an entire generation.
Together we shall save our planet, or together we shall perish in its flames.
What was it about that guy?
Looks, style, empathy.
He was incredibly charming.
Intellectual and progressive.
He was the future. He was next.
President for just over 1,000 days, Kennedy navigated events and crises that changed the world.
Kennedy is feeling the pressure from the civil rights activists.
This was a country on nuclear war footing.
This could be the last mistake that anybody makes politically.
He changed us in the process of his own growth.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
60 years after his assassination, we are still fascinated by the triumphs and flaws of the youngest president ever elected.
I ask you to join us in all the tomorrows yet to come, in building America, moving America, picking this country of ours up and sending it into the 60s.
In the spring of 1946, 29-year-old John F. Kennedy was busy on the campaign trail, working to make himself known to the people of Boston as a candidate to represent Massachusetts' 11th Congressional District. On June 17th, he participated in the annual Bunker Hill Day Parade.
There'd be certain days during the campaign that his back would be bothering him. And I'd say, do you want to rest? And he'd say, no, there's only a short time before the campaign is over.
Waving to the masses of people along the parade route, things were going well for the candidate until he collapsed in the street under the hot summer sun.
Jack can barely stand, can barely walk, and he campaigns from morning to night.
Despite the reality of his health conditions and getting only 4 to 5 hours of sleep each night, he appeared energetic to swarms of onlookers. At campaign events, he said he stood for free enterprise, the right to a living wage, and affordable housing needs for the working man. Jack impressed audiences with his heroic service record and charmed them with his enthusiasm, candor, and humor. Joe Kennedy contributed to Jack's campaign financially and also made countless calls to reporters and editors, promoting his son's campaign. Though Joe tried to buy Jack's way toward victory, Jack sought to earn it through labor and merit.
I mean, his father had money, but money doesn't always win campaigns. You have to work really hard.
After defeating 9 other candidates in the primary, Election Day arrived. Kennedy won a landslide victory, taking 73% of the vote. On January 3rd, 1947, at the age of 29, John F. Kennedy officially became a member of Congress.
He walked into difficult circumstances in the sense that the Republicans had won control of Congress after a long Democratic period. So he was a minority member of the House of Representatives. and he had no power, you know, had a tiny office in the kind of the farthest reaches of Capitol Hill.
As a congressman, Kennedy showed his interest in and stance on international affairs when he supported the Truman Doctrine, a policy to contain Soviet expansion following World War II.
I think everyone who lived through the World War II era couldn't not think of the world as relevant to you. After Pearl Harbor, for every American, it was clear that the world mattered, and we were not disconnected from it.
In 1947, Kennedy embarked on a working trip to Europe.
At times when the House was in session, he just sort of took off for, you know, weeks on end to travel overseas. He was interested in the issues, interested in just the challenge of reconstructing Europe after World War II.
He was lively at the beginning of the trip, but his blood pressure began to drop after arriving in London. After being rushed to a hospital in London, he was diagnosed with Addison's disease, an incurable condition causing weight loss, low blood pressure, and weakness that would plague him for the rest of his life. To help with the pain, Kennedy was prescribed the steroid cortisone.
Someone walked in as Kennedy was giving himself an injection of cortisone for his Addison's disease, and the person said, "You probably get used to that." And JFK took the needle and stuck it in the other guy's leg, and the guy was like, "Ow," and he went, "That's what it feels like to me every time I do it. It never feels any better than that."
But I think what all these health problems fed was Kennedy's sense he would not live to an old age, that he would die young.
I've always felt, for example, if you look at the JFK speeches, there's always a sense of time is short, time is running out.
He knew he had to use his limited time wisely. With this in mind, Kennedy wanted to move forward on his political journey. Fueled by a driving ambition to make his mark and create change, Kennedy began eyeing a spot in the Senate.
You'd climb one rung of the ladder, and he'd stand there for just a microsecond, take a deep breath, and then he'd start looking to the next one.
He increased his public appearances around Massachusetts, accepting every invitation he received.
So for really about 4 years, from like 48 to 52, he went home every weekend and traveled around the state of Massachusetts, going to any event that would have him. You know, Boy Scout events, ice cream socials, church events, anything, Rotary clubs.
From Holyoke to Fall River and Chicopee to Springfield, he spent a great deal of time on the road speaking about issues like education, labor rights, health care, and taxes.
So Kennedy built an organization and just, did all they could to make him better known throughout the state.
Despite being the representative of a moderately sized district in Boston, international issues were of particular interest to Kennedy. By the end of the 1940s, no international issue was of greater interest to him than communism.
In theory, communism was about everyone being equal and there not being classes. Communism, on the one hand, had great faith that this is the way of the future. It is inevitable. On the other hand, you can also help it along. So you get rid of opposition parties. In the worst excesses of communism, people were executed or died a slower death by being sent to prison camps. The U.S. described communism often as tyranny versus democracy in the United States.
In the mid to late 1940s, the domino theory took shape. The domino theory predicted that if one nation fell to communism, others would soon follow. As the Korean War raged on, many people, including Kennedy, believed that Asia was most threatened by communism. With higher office in his sights, Kennedy decided to visit the region, meet the leaders of its countries, and report back to the U.S. about the spread of communism in Asia.
He saw this as being the place where the Cold War would be won or lost, not in Europe, but in the developing world.
There was a lot of legitimate fear in the United States about the spread of communism.
In the fall of 1951, Kennedy was yearning for a more powerful voice in politics. To achieve that goal, he'd need to improve his knowledge of foreign policy. In October, he set out for an arduous trip that covered more than 25,000 miles over 6 weeks. He traveled across the Middle East and Southeast Asia, stopping in countries such as Israel, Pakistan, India, French Indochina, Korea, and Japan. Though Kennedy was initially opposed to the idea, Joe Sr. pressured him into taking 2 of his younger siblings on the trip, Sister Patricia, age 27, and brother Robert, age 26, known by the family as Bobby. A routine schedule was established. Kennedy would meet with high-ranking leaders of the country they were visiting, and afterward he would speak with journalists and intellectuals. As the trip went on, Kennedy valued Bobby's insights and relentless energy.
He discovers through 7 weeks overseas that there is a depth to Bobby that he had not realized before. And that really is the beginning of the close Jack-Bobby relationship that lasts throughout the rest of Jack's life.
After the trip, Kennedy delivered his report, disparaging what he thought was an inadequate American response to critical international problems. Kennedy now had a new perspective on the world, the growing threat of communism and the effects of colonialism. He felt that the only way for democracy to win against communism was for the native population to support it, ideologically and militarily on their own, but with the aid of the West.
I think that we should have insisted 4 or 5 years ago that the French get out of French Indochina and permit a free native government to step up, as the natives probably would prefer the communists to the French because they want the French out of there. We'd have to offer the natives a third alternative, self-government of their own, free of the French or the communists.
When he returned from Asia, he knew it was time to begin the next chapter of his political career.
Our audience, of course, is particularly interested in your views because it's been mentioned that you are a possible or probable candidate to the United States Senate against Senator Lodge. Have you decided whether or not you're going to oppose Senator Lodge this year?
Well, Mr. Huey, I plan to announce my plans about what I thought I might do about the end of April. At that time, I thought I'd make them definite, but I'm certainly considering it very strongly.
On April 6, 1952, Kennedy announced his candidacy for the Senate.
I think he saw it as a more powerful policy-making position, but I think he also saw it as a politically more advantageous position to be in.
Well, politics is about opportunity and seizing the moment. Kennedy saw this as his moment.
Despite his wealth, family connections, and his political record thus far, the campaign would be massive and energy depleting, a non-stop effort. Kennedy would run against Republican Henry Cabot Lodge, Jr., who likewise had a rich, multi-generational family history in politics.
They were both, wealthy, Harvard-educated, respected families. Both of them were centrists politically.
If Kennedy was to emerge victorious, he knew the campaigning methods for his congressional run would have to expand and evolve. When Kennedy was too busy to appear in person, his brother and campaign manager, Bobby, took over. Rough around the edges and cold when he needed to be, Bobby was relentless and ruthless, working around the clock for his older brother's campaign. "I don't care if anyone around here likes me," he would say, "as long as they like Jack." As the tense race began, Kennedy went on the campaign trail and rallied the efforts of friends, family, and more than 20,000 volunteers.
When we vote this November, let's all remember, vote for Kennedy. Make him your selection.
Kennedy raced across Massachusetts, giving speeches, attending campaign events, even creating the Kennedy Tea Party, gatherings where Kennedy could meet and connect with female voters.
He's your kind of man, so do all that you can, and vote for Kennedy.
During the campaign, Kennedy improved his outreach by making many television appearances. He even enrolled in a CBS television school where he honed his skills in front of a camera. He'd use these methods throughout his political career.
Once TV came to the fore, it was not terribly surprising that Jack wanted to know how he was coming across on camera. And that was something that was always very important to him.
After months of hard work, it was November 4th, Election Day. As Kennedy's mother, Rose, recalled, it was one of the few occasions she saw him visibly nervous, pacing and eager for results.
The Kennedy Lodge race was considered the marquee Senate race of 1952 because you do have these two glamorous, wealthy, respected, charismatic, attractive candidates going head to head. And it was a very tough, close-fought race.
Suddenly, the campaign headquarters erupted in celebration. Kennedy had defeated Lodge by 70,000 votes. Though Lodge never congratulated Kennedy in person, his concession arrived via telegram later that day. Kennedy was a United States Senator.
That's out of about 2,250,000. Yeah. So I think that's about 5% of the vote. Good, fine. Well, I guess you're glad it's over, aren't you, Bobby? I am, Jack. Okay.
Kennedy first laid eyes on his future wife at a Georgetown dinner party in the spring of 1951. He wouldn't see her again until the spring of 1952. Like Danish journalist Inga Arvad years before, this woman fascinated him. Born Jacqueline Lee Bouvier on July 28, 1929, in Southampton, New York, her mother, Janet, was Irish, and her father, John Blackjack Bouvier, was of French, Scottish, and English descent. Raised Catholic like Kennedy, she also grew up in an environment of economic and societal privilege. She was talented and ambitious even as a child, taking ballet lessons, learning multiple languages, and reading often. She was a bright yet rebellious child. One of her teachers described her as very clever and full of the devil. On the surface, her life seemed idyllic, though it was anything but. Her father was an aggressive alcoholic and a notorious philanderer, often absent from her life. Blackjack's neglectful behavior led to a divorce from Janet in 1940 and affected Jackie for the rest of her life. Jackie spent her senior year of college in France, which would be a major influence on the European aesthetic often associated with her. She graduated from George Washington University in 1951, the same year she met a rising congressman from Boston. When Jackie first met Kennedy, she thought he was a man who clearly did not want to marry. But he leaned across the dinner table and asked for a date in May 1952. For Kennedy, who was interested in history, politics, and literature, he was at first taken aback by Jackie's intelligence. then entranced. Despite the clear attraction between Kennedy and Bouvier, others were wary of the relationship. Members of Kennedy's inner circle warned Jackie about his womanizing ways.
You know, one of the legacies of being Joe Kennedy's son was that you learned very early that men were allowed to fool around, to have as many lovers as they wanted. Jack's promiscuity, you know, is learned as a young man from watching his father.
They had a sense of entitlement about what they could do that other people couldn't do, what they could get away with that other people would never think that they could get away with.
As Jackie processed the news, she felt it was an inevitable masculine flaw, saying, "Well, that's what men do." Despite warnings, she fell for him.
I mean, she knew that he had that mix of danger and charm, and I don't think she was kidding herself. She knew what she was getting into.
He liked to play the field. He liked having all of these girlfriends. He liked having young women around and cared little about marriage. It was his father who actually sort of put the pressure on him, saying, if you want a national political career, you can't be this carefree bachelor. You need to get married. You need to be respectable.
There's no secret that he was cheating on her constantly, and she was aware of it. She looked the other way, in part because that was how she was raised in the upper echelon of society, to accept it. But she was devoted to him.
I would say that there was love throughout. You know, I would say that, you know, from the beginning all the way to the end.
On the evening of June 24th, 1953, the couple shared dinner at Martin's Tavern in Georgetown. That evening, at booth 3, Jack proposed to Jackie, and she said yes.
This looks like a royal wedding. You know, like, if you look at that church and you look at those pictures, it's hard to believe that he was, you know, just a senator and she was, you know, just sort of a socialite. It looks like they're like the king and queen of some country.
Kennedy later sent his parents a note which read, "At last I know the true meaning of rapture. Thanks, Mom and Dad, for making me worthy of her." Jackie had a certain sense of order and her own set of standards for furniture, food, fashion, and aesthetics. Kennedy, a wealthy man with a carefree style, had some adapting to do. The two had interesting intellectual conversations where Kennedy found he could speak to her as an equal, from incoming reports on Indochina to works by classic writers like Voltaire. Jackie translated books from French to English for him.
Jackie was very well read. You know, she loved to read and she loved to write. She was a very creative person. She loved to paint.
By January 1954, they had settled into their new home in the Georgetown neighborhood of Washington, D.C. A new chapter in the Kennedy story had begun. As Kennedy settled into his position in the Senate in 1953, he needed a new legislative assistant, someone who could conduct research, provide counsel, and help draft legislative programs. Ted Sorensen, a 24-year-old attorney from Nebraska, was interested in a position. He was an unlikely choice, in the words of Robert Dallek, young, comparatively inexperienced, and almost entirely unknown.
He was born in Nebraska in 1928. He was one of 5 children. They were not at all wealthy, maybe middle class, lower middle class. He clearly knew, even in college, that he wouldn't stay in Nebraska. He somehow felt that he had a larger purpose. Within weeks of graduating from law school, he was on the train from Nebraska to Washington, D.C. The election had taken place, and new senators and members of Congress were coming in. And that was when he was recommended to the office of the new senator from Massachusetts.
Sorensen had already received a job offer from Washington Senator Henry Jackson, but sought an interview with the 35-year-old Kennedy.
Senator Kennedy and his team were literally moving into the office. And he was junior senator, so it was a small office, chairs and boxes going in and out. And they apparently took 2 chairs and sat them outside the door in the hall and had a conversation that was not longer than 15 minutes. And the senator looked at the resume, and he apparently said, well, you're not Irish, and you're not Catholic, and you're not from Massachusetts, and you didn't go to Harvard. Then he said, but this looks interesting. Let's give it a trial run.
He would later become one of the most important figures in Kennedy's life.
Kennedy was very worldly. He'd traveled all over and had all kinds of privileges that Ted could hardly imagine.
That perspective was very helpful to their collaboration and to JFK's political prospects, because it gave JFK a sense of the rest of the country.
Within about 3 months, the first speechwriting opportunities came.
After working as Kennedy's legislative assistant, Sorensen took on the role of speechwriter. The two became such a pair that after work, Kennedy would drop off Sorensen at the bus stop for his journey home.
Kennedy would sort of lay out what he was thinking. Sorensen would go off, sometimes stay up all night and kind of write it into this lyrical, magical speech.
JFK would always have comments, and there'd be lines drawn from here to there, and certain things crossed out or question marks about this or that. So it was very much a partnership.
Sorensen regularly sat in the front row at Kennedy's speaking engagements and made detailed notes about his performance, providing critical feedback. This inspired Kennedy to improve his oratorical prowess. One of Kennedy's favorite methods was reading out loud in tandem with recordings of Sir Winston Churchill's speeches.
Churchill, one of the great orators of all time, Kennedy admired him and understood the power of words and the power of a great speech. So he practiced his speeches.
Sorensen considered Kennedy an enigmatic character with a youthful spirit, embodied with a natural sense of leadership, and a genuine friend. Their steadfast partnership was a constant for the remainder of Kennedy's life. Sorensen's support was especially vital when Jack was getting his footing as a young senator. During his years in the Senate, Kennedy's interests were many and varied. He focused on both domestic and foreign policy issues, ranging from labor, industry and welfare, to communism and foreign diplomacy. He was slowly but steadily growing from a local Massachusetts congressman into a national politician.
He played very heavily on the notion that he thought the United States was falling behind the Soviet Union. And he accused the Eisenhower administration of not, having as much defense spending as it should, allowing the Soviets to surge ahead of the Americans in the space race.
One domestic issue which caught the attention of both Kennedy and his brother Bobby was corruption within the trade unions.
He was known for going against, racketeering and organized crime.
In his later years as a senator, Kennedy gained attention when he joined the Select Committee on Improper Activities in Labor and Management, better known as the McClellan Committee. Bobby was selected as chief counsel.
Kennedy was a supporter of labor, But he was also very much against what he thought were some of the excesses of the union bosses. And Jimmy Hoffa, the Teamsters boss, was considered deeply corrupt.
The McClellan Committee hearings were televised, allowing Kennedy to cement himself as a prominent political figure on a national stage.
Senator Kennedy, as a member of the McClellan Rockets Committee, and his brother Bob, as chief counsel to the committee, have played key roles in this historic episode.
And you can't tell us who we talked to besides you, Mr. Hoffa, and the other gentleman who was involved. I think you'll have to ask him, Senator. Your accountant, I'm asking you. You're the one who made the report to the committee about what your accountant found, and now we find that there are no records, that he merely talked to you and to the other gentleman involved, and that the whole transaction was in cash.
I think Kennedy saw that it was just a real politically explosive issue. It had that level of prominence.
Senator, won't you tell us something about your campaign for a stronger Massachusetts?
Of course, this is a never-ending job, because when we reach the solution to one problem, we find new ones arising. Massachusetts is either directly or indirectly affected by everything we do or do not do.
As Senator Kennedy's career gained strength and momentum in Washington, the condition of his back continued to deteriorate.
Kennedy, actually, even in his 52 campaign, spent a lot of it on crutches. And he was smart enough that when the cameras came, he would kind of put them off to the side.
You see him coming down the stairs in the newsreels, walking, as someone said, he had to walk sideways. He couldn't just walk straight down the stairs. His back was killing him.
His painful condition began at Harvard after he sustained an injury playing football. It became worse during the war and had continued to decline in the years since due to poor medical treatment and misdiagnosis.
Hugh Sidey once reported that he couldn't pick up a golf club off the floor, and someone else said he couldn't put his socks on.
One aide said that Kennedy at one point told him he would have given up all of his political success to be pain-free. It was this, this chronic albatross.
In 1954, 1 year into his Senate term, Kennedy began to seriously contemplate spinal surgery. Kennedy's father cautioned him to think of former President Franklin D. Roosevelt, who led the country from a wheelchair. Joe Sr. hoped this image would persuade Jack to decide against the dangerous operation. In the end, Jack elected to go under the knife, seeking any solution that might alleviate the agonizing pain he endured every day.
There was a chance that he would die on the operating table, and he knew that going in. But he decided, I would rather take the risk of dying than live in this extraordinary pain that I'm living in, that is crippling me, that is leaving me unable to do what I want to do.
On October 10, 1954, Kennedy arrived at the hospital. Kennedy matriarch Rose recalled the night before the surgery and how it affected her husband Joe. Despite the risks, Kennedy moved forward with the surgery. The surgery failed, putting Kennedy into a coma. Anything that could go wrong did. He contracted an infection, and his condition took a nosedive. As his family rushed to the hospital, Kennedy received last rites. Pope Pius XII sent his words of support. Lying motionless in his hospital bed, Kennedy's life appeared to be ebbing away yet again. Like his earlier brushes with death, Kennedy managed to pull through. Though by no means healthy or cured of the infection, his health stabilized enough to transfer him to the Kennedys' Palm Beach residence, where he spent the next several weeks recovering from the operation. Jackie was constantly at his side. She fed him, read to him, and kept him entertained while he was bedridden.
When JFK had his spinal surgery, you know, Jackie was this amazing nursemaid figure in his life. The love for him was always there. Even if sometimes, you know, we were to question whether it was reciprocal, where she was concerned, it was there. And you really saw it in the way that she took care of him in those early days after the operation.
By Christmas 1954, Kennedy still remained at the family's Florida home, welcoming an array of visitors that included his close friend, Lem Billings. During this time, Joe Sr. noted that Kennedy couldn't sleep for more than an hour or two, so he studied to take his mind off the pain. To help pass the time, Kennedy took up the challenge he had envisioned for months, writing a new book. Bedridden and lacking energy, this new writing project was something Jackie thought pushed her husband forward. The book, Kennedy decided, would document the life and legacy of influential United States senators who had taken courageous stances at key moments in history.
He was looking to forge a political identity, and he wanted to package himself as this sort of an intellectual, modern, progressive statesman.
Based in Washington at the time, Ted Sorensen worked with Kennedy on the writing process, taking dictation and assisting with research. By the summer of 1955, Kennedy and Sorensen had finished the entire 266-page draft of the book called Profiles in Courage. In a happy coincidence, Kennedy was also walking without crutches for the first time in months. For months between the winter of 1954 and mid-1955, while Kennedy recuperated from back surgery, he collaborated with Sorensen to write Profiles in Courage. The book was published on January 1st, 1956.
And then allegations start to come out that it was actually Ted Sorensen who wrote the book. And Kennedy saw this as both infuriating and also possibly devastating to this political image that he was trying to forge. Jackie was utterly furious, and she felt that Sorensen had not disavowed his role as forcefully as he should have initially.
It was a genuine collaboration. Ted would always say he had a hand in it. That's as far as he would go.
Profiles in Courage.
It was an interesting job because all of us who hold a position in a legislature are concerned with the problems of how other senators and congressmen have endured the pressures which all of us undergo.
That book, of course, won a Pulitzer Prize. Sort of gained him some respect as someone other than a politician.
The ideas about democracy, courage, and sacrifice were there. The question of how faithfully Kennedy would stick to those ideas and values would be tested again and again. The presidential election of 1956 would be an important opportunity for Kennedy to gain momentum on his political journey. Despite a successful first term with impressive economic policies, Republican President Dwight D. Eisenhower was facing health issues. He had reservations about running for a second term, but eventually returned to the ticket. An important question bubbled up in Washington: which Democratic candidate would take on Eisenhower? The leading hopeful was Adlai Stevenson, who had run and lost against Eisenhower in 1952. If Adlai Stevenson was going to campaign against Eisenhower, he needed a strong running mate. Speculation surrounded Kennedy as a viable option. At first, Kennedy was hesitant, even surprised when he saw his name suggested in newspapers. But after some consideration, he decided this was the necessary next step in his political career. He plowed forward into the political fray and began to hone his prowess leading up to the Democratic National Convention that summer.
Well, I think he spotted a potential opening for himself. The nominee was probably going to be Adlai Stevenson again, so Kennedy
thought he could butter up Adlai Stevenson and be chosen as an ideal running mate.
If Kennedy had any chance of winning the vice presidential nomination on the Stevenson ticket, he would need to prove himself by openly displaying support for Stevenson's candidacy. His aides suggested the first step was helping Stevenson supporter John Lynch take control of the Massachusetts Democratic Party, then chaired by Onion farmer William H. Onions Burke.
The people who encouraged Kennedy to do it said it was a brilliant move, genius, etc. Those who opposed it thought it was a stupid waste of his time, a diversion, allowing himself to get pulled into the muck of Massachusetts politics. And Kennedy was persuaded to enter that battle.
He actually went out and met with Burke and told him, I'm going after you and we're going to beat you. And Burke was defiant, says, come ahead, I'm going to beat you in stronger terms than that.
Shortly before the convention, Burke was overthrown by Kennedy's team in a landslide vote. Onions Burke was enraged by the development. Having overthrown Burke and replacing him with devoted Stevenson supporter John M. Lynch, Kennedy had backed Stevenson in a big way, rallying the entire Massachusetts Democratic Party behind him. Kennedy was determined to continue climbing the ladder. This was the next rung on his rise to prominence.
He campaigns vigorously for Adlai Stevenson, again, getting his name out there and getting the loyalty and name recognition.
This strategic move gave Kennedy the influence he needed to be selected to lead the Massachusetts delegation at the 1956 Democratic National Convention. He would soon know if his efforts had been enough to claim the vice presidential nomination. Next on Kennedy.
Clearly, he was better prepared than anybody.
Nobody had ever campaigned like that.
The impression that stays with me is that what started as a rather small effort began to grow and to grow and to grow.
The more people saw of him, the better he did.
I am today announcing my candidacy for the presidency of the United States.